Welcome to the Escape News Podcast. I'm your host, Chad.
I'm your other host, Ryan.
And thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about British Gulags in Kenya. So, not the most savory topic, I guess. The things you learn on Reddit, I think, is where it came up.
That's a scary statement.
Exactly. Which you can look up some of these things, and some of the details that Ryan's going to share a little bit more are harder, I think, to find if you didn't have Reddit to find these things. So because everything's, political agendas. So what we're talking about here is the Mau Mau uprising in particular. This is kind of the general overarching thing that, I don't know, not leads to the gulags in Kenya.
It created the situation in which the gulags became a thing. And so,
exactly. So this is also known as the Mau Mau Rebellion or the Kenyan Emergency or the Mau Mau Revolt. There are a lot of terminologies for it.
Yeah.
There's a war in British Kenya colony between Kenya Land and Freedom Army, also known as the Mau Mau, and the British authorities. So you have Britain versus people who kind of want their own place. The Mau Mau Rebellion consisted of a diverse movement rather than a cohesive organization. And support for the rebellion came from those who objected to Britain's imperial presence, which, of course, nobody really likes another government coming in telling them what to do.
Nope.
So some of the inciting reasons why there was this revolt and why there were problems here is because of low wages, access to land, not being your own citizen there, not being able to have your own land is annoying. Some other things, female genital mutilation was a big part of it. And then identity cards, kipande, I'm not exactly sure how to say that word. Identity cards that black workers had to submit to their white employers, who sometimes refused to return them or even destroyed the cards, making it incredibly difficult for workers to apply for other employment. So basically, you have one country, Britain in this case, who's very, white people, and they come into a black country and they say, hey, we're going to take your land. And if you want to work, you have to come to us for employment and regulating all that. So obviously, they were not too happy about this. Some of the events that led up to it, to the actual revolt, the Mau Mau secret society was, there was a rumor that this was going around and they were filtering in information about secret meetings held in the forest outside Nairobi. And this secret society had an oath to drive out the white man from Kenya. And that was generally the goal of the Mau Mau's was, we don't need these people here. We're going to be our own place. And then because of this, on August 24th in 1952, a curfew was imposed by the Kenyan government, which was obviously the British government. And they imposed a curfew on 3 districts outside of Nairobi, where gangs of arsonists believed to be members of the Mau Mau were setting fire to the homes of Africans who refused to take the oath. And that was a big thing, was these Mau Mau's would come in and force their own people to take the oath to drive out the white man.
And it's important to note that even during this time in Kenya, there was actually several factions within Kenya. Some of them were just people that just didn't really care as much about the British rule, or they were okay with it. They were kind of on the fence. There was not a unified front against the British, which upset the Mau Mau's. They're like, how are you not against them? Why aren't you joining us? So that's why Kenya was very much in a bunch of turmoil. The Mau Mau's were trying to get everyone unified, polarized against Britain, and some people just weren't on board. So
a lot of political divide there. And of course, with anything, just like we had spoken about the Armenian genocide, there are a lot of factions in there and a lot of information, disinformation, because even to this day, Britain has acknowledged this to some extent and given some reparations to those affected by it. But there are some aspects of it that they basically did away with and hid, and we only know about some of it because some information was left in a particular place. I don't know. I feel like we covered something about this. Oh, was it Operation Northwoods or Mockingbird? We talked about as well, and like somebody had accidentally left a bit of information, or MK Ultra.
Yeah.
We know a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
So on October 19th in 1952, the British troops, the British government announced that they were going to send troops to Kenya to help fight against the Mau Mau. And then right after that, we have kind of a big inciting incident that you're going to talk about.
Yeah, so Britain was or the British were kind of like, they were just done with this, right? I mean, there's the infighting, the insurrection, the kind of the waffling, a bunch of stuff. And so they're just like, we're done. Like, we're bringing in the army. We're going to put this to bed, because the British were very heavy-handed when it came. They were used to ruling their colonies, and like we're just gonna put this, we're gonna end this now. They brought in a bunch of their army, came in, and they had planned what they called Operation Jock Scott. I mean, I don't really understand like what that means.
British
Maybe,
terminology, maybe.
yeah, maybe it means something to people in Britain, or if you're more familiar with their history of what any of that means.
No.
But anyways, they called it Operation Jock Scott. Started on October 21st of 1952, and the idea was they were just going to sweep through Nairobi. They're going to capture, detain, arrest all the Mau Mau leaders and sympathizers. Uh, so a couple of things wrong with this is that the operation was not super secret leading up to it. So some of the details and the plan leaked, and the Mau Mau leaders actually caught wind of it, and then the higher ups within the Mau Mau organization actually fled into the woods ahead of time, leaving kind of the middle management or something kind of behind to take the brunt of it. And then the other part of it, that Britain wasn't really discerning about who was Mau Mau and who wasn't.
Mm.
So they didn't really have a good bead on like all the different factions within Kenya. So everyone was Mau Mau, or most people were Mau Mau. And if you denied being Mau Mau, that probably meant that you were,
Yeah.
in their eyes. And so they kind of went very heavy handed and came in very hot with all this. And so there's mass arrests. And this is where like the heart of like the travesty kind of occurred, because they were just like, this is where like ill treatment, and which is a very like muted term for what they actually did. There was like just executions, like actually like I think I wrote down they were executing like almost over 1,000 people, just like punitive measures, like, you know, you've been arrested, tried, convicted, we're gonna shoot you now, that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of just murder,
Mm.
rapes, and all this kind of crazy stuff. And there was just like, it was really bad. The British armies came through and just massacred like a lot of people in this. It was very, very heavy handed, very broad. And this actually ended up polarizing a lot of the factions. Like they're like, okay, well, we weren't with Mau Mau. We were having issues with Mau Mau, and now the people we thought were either indifferent or somewhat on our side, the British, are very much not that. And so it kind of drove a lot of people into the Mau Mau organization. It was really bad. And so this is kind of where the heart of like where this whole British Gulag thing is, this mistreatment of prisoners. So like I said, they were arresting people and then mistreating them, and executing people. So it wasn't like an act of war where they just came in and were shooting everyone. Like they came in, arrested a bunch of people, and then just held like mock trials. From what I understand, like they weren't even real trials. They're just executing people, and then just crazy stuff like that. So
I think a word that you're going to hear a lot if you dig around into type in like British Gulag Kenya, not so much on the internet. You're going to like, I mean, not on the internet, but I mean on Google. If you look this up, you're going to see a lot more of, I would say, British propaganda and certain ways to view it. But there are certain books you can go look up about this, or searching more on Reddit, you'll find some of this information. There's a word pipeline that you'll come up across. So there was this project that they were trying to find out who had taken the Mau Mau oath, because you're not supposed to know people that you've
like
done
Fight
it.
Club.
Yeah,
You
and
don't
like
talk about it.
yeah, exactly. The Mau Mau people would, even if you have taken the Mau Mau oath, whether it be by force or not force, and you did not kill a white farmer or something like that when you were commanded to, you were then killed by the Mau Mau people because you're not supporting the oath that you have taken. And so part of the British government was or their plan was to just eradicate that, or deprogram in some ways people from having that, or find out who has this Mau Mau oath that they've taken. And so they did this project called Pipeline, that they'd make them walk for days without food and without anywhere to go to the bathroom, or they put them in places just to sit there for however long, whatever they could do. There was some torture and various other psychological things that they were implementing to get these people to confess to having taken the Mau Mau oath. And another one that you'll probably come up with it if you research this. Shortly after, I think this was in October of that year in 52. And shortly after that, in January of 53, there was a death penalty for administering the Mau Mau oath. So you couldn't even, like, technically by the law of the government. If you were going to get anybody to sign up or tell them that they have to take the oath, then then you could be killed for doing that by the British government. So, but basically after that, panic spread through the Europeans and Kenya after the slaying of white settler farmer and his family by the Mau Mau group, and then settler groups displeased with the government's response to the increasing Mau Mau threat, they started creating their own commando units to deal with it. So you just kind of have more escalation.
Yeah.
After that, eventually the government comes through and starts cordoning off areas where the Mau Mau activists are, to separate them from Kenya, or not Kenya as a whole, but just separate them from other people to push down, quell the radicalism.
Divide and conquer, I think, was a big deal for them. Just, separate people and then press them. Yeah,
and we're not talking like particular great lengths detail of all the actions that were taken, but if you look at anything just like with the Armenian genocide or previous events that we've discussed, it gets pretty gruesome like very quickly when you start looking into it. And you can always go do your own due diligence if you want to know more, but we're here more to go through the general, hey, this is something to be aware of, because the Armenian genocide, this has ramifications to this day. There are many political factions and people alive. Well, not as many people alive nowadays, because this is starting to be, I guess this isn't as long ago as the Armenian genocide, but it's starting to be in the past far enough that it still affects people, and there are still people from that time period.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, was it the 60s, right? 1952, 1960.
Yeah.
It's kind of the full breadth of this whole thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So I don't really know what it's like to be in Kenya and what the actual ramifications are on the ground. I didn't look up anything like that, but more of this event of a British gulag, and you put those words together, create a very volatile word. That's a distinctly Russian Soviet communist era type of word.
And it wasn't until 2012. I mean, as recent as 2012, semi-recent, was like 8 years ago or 9 years ago. I mean, that's when Britain officially admitted that, I don't think we did the right thing there.
Yeah.
Like you'd mentioned, some reparations were given as a result. So
it takes countries a very long time to come around to this. And you'll see that, I mean, there are many things, I believe, with Japan. I don't believe any U.S. president has actually gone down to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So, I mean, plenty of countries have done wrong, and it takes them a very long time to fess up to it.
Yeah, there's still the rape of Nanking.
Yep.
I don't think Japan really doesn't talk about that much, but there's Japan and China don't like each other.
Not very much. Which by the time this podcast goes out, or this episode goes out, we may be at war.
With China?
Oh boy. Afterburner. So
I didn't check my phone in the last hour. I guess things have like really changed.
Things change quickly.
Wow.
And of course, we're recording this ahead of the time, but I don't know. We'll see. Support us on Afterburner, but of course, support us on the show and share with your friends. Comment if you have things to add. We appreciate it. And of course, like or dislike. Either way, we appreciate you being here and listening and learning, hopefully, something new every day. So, see you guys later.
Bye.